Welcome to the Art of Quantum Healing, where we speak about trauma, mental health and healing. I am your host, Lisa Nadler, and I'm thrilled to have you come into my energetic field. In this podcast, I will be sharing my own personal experiences to guide, teach, and help pave the way. We'll also be welcoming so many other divine souls who have overcome trauma and found happiness, health, wealth, and next level abundance through mind, body, and soul connection. My mission is to help women high vibe and thrive with inner peace, passion, and purpose.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Art of Quantum Healing. Here today, we are going to go deep and talk about sexual trauma and my healing process. Just a little disclaimer, there may be some triggers that come up for you around addiction, sexual trauma, physical and mental abuse, as I share a lot of my story. So please, if you're going to be triggered, stop here and listen when you are ready to hear. I will also be sharing how I overcame a lot of sexual trauma in this episode. And we're going to go a little bit deep into what actually happened to me. Sex is always a really juicy subject, and sometimes it's one of the hardest subjects for us to actually look at within our own life, and to actually feel into why we do what we do and how we feel how we feel, and why sometimes we don't receive as much pleasure, play, and happiness as we actually want. And a lot of times it can be simple things that have happened throughout our life, and then a lot of time it can be actually something that was quite traumatic. And I like to say that someone's trauma is different from somebody's else. You can actually have something that perceived as tiny happen to you that can have a massive impact on your life. And this is in any trauma within your life. So it's not just sexual. So I just want you to know that as I'm sharing my story, my sexual trauma is quite expansive, but don't judge what's happening within you by what has happened to me. We're all on our own journey, and what can affect one person can affect another person totally different. So let me share about my story. I actually have been sexually abused 3 times by 3 different men. And the first time I was sexually abused was by one of my mum's boyfriends, and he used to fiddle around with me a lot. I think I was about 5, 6. And my mum would go to tennis, and it was always on a Sunday, and he would call me. First, he started calling me into his room, and it was like we used to play. We used to have fun. I was a little kid, and it was fun. And then it started getting a little bit deeper, and it started getting a little bit of him asking me to do things that made me feel very uncomfortable. And a part of me knew it wasn't right, but a part of me didn't understand. And, there was a lot of manipulation that went around it, a lot of mental manipulation as well as the physical that used to make me think, well, maybe I am doing the right thing. Maybe this is okay. But it always felt weird. It always felt not right. And then it got to the stage where he started asking me to do things that I really didn't want to. And then it progressed. He would pretend he was teaching me how to drive, and he'd put me on his knee in the car, and I'd be driving the steering wheel, and he'd get me so it was comfortable in a situation, and then the abuse would happen. And there was lots of different ways he did it. He always did it when my mum was not around. And my mum was so happy that I didn't want to say anything. I knew there was something wrong, but there was a part of me that my mum, we've been through so much throughout our life, and it was really, for me, the first time I actually saw her truly happy. She'd gone through quite a lot of healing herself in the few years before she met Andy, and it was from separating from my other stepfather. So it was like, I didn't want to rock the boat. I wanted my mum to be happy. I'd seen her go through so much trauma in her life and so much tragedy and drinking, and basically rinse and repeat what I was doing. And I was very happy when they actually split up. And I didn't tell her until I was in my late 20s. And I remember her saying to me, I wonder why you'd beg me not to go to tennis. And I didn't understand. Or please take me with you. And she said, I could not understand. And now she does. And it took us a little bit both to get over that, because she went into that blaming of herself. Up until then, I held all the blame, shame, and guilt. I was just... I didn't know it was wrong at that age, but I knew something wasn't right. And then when I was at college, it happened again by a very close friend of mine. And by that stage, I knew it was wrong. And it was a lot harsher. It was a lot more physical. It was a lot more definitely mental. It was a lot like holding the hand over my face. And it was not a nice thing. And I remember waking up in the morning and just wondering what the hell I'd done. Why had this happened to me again? I just couldn't understand. And then the third time was probably the most traumatic, because it was a few years later, and it was by a very, very close family friend, And it was horrific. It was horrific. And he'd been drinking and he was babysitting me. And I remember waking up and basically he was between my legs, and I remember freaking out at what was happening, and I didn't know what was happening. And it was a real kick in the head, kick in the gut, kick in the teeth. It was emotionally destroying. And I really went into a dark place after that. And I blame myself because it happened 3 times. And when something happens once, you think, and you're little, you think, oh, yeah, that was weird. I don't know what that. And you block it out and you keep on moving through your day. And then it happens twice and you're like, well, this isn't right. And then it happens 3 times. You're like, fuck, I'm doing something. This is me. I'm doing something to actually bring this into my life, because this is not normal. So I formed this whole belief story, this whole belief system around it was me. It was me that actually attracted this. I had done something. I must have flirted. I must have brought this on myself. And I really did blame myself that I had attracted it. And then I shut down. I absolutely shut down. I decided that I was disconnecting myself from anything sexual, from any feeling in that area, from any feminine aspect of basically the lower area of myself. I just shut myself down. I didn't want to feel. I didn't want anything I didn't actually want to know that part of my body. And then I started using sex as power, because I realized that even though I hated it, I saw the look in the men's eyes. And my other sexual partners that I'd had, which wasn't many, I think I'd only had about 2 by then. I was very, I was very a one woman girl, I should say, one woman guy. And I realized that sex, for me, if I wasn't using it for love, and I wasn't using it for intimacy, and I wasn't using it for really bonding with someone and bringing them into my heart, it was going to be power. I was going to use it for power. And everything else that had happened throughout my life, my mother had always said, be strong. You be strong. Don't you let anyone walk all over you. If you're strong, then nothing is going to stop you. So I was very masculine. I became basically a masculine beast. I didn't hold much femininity in me at all. I was like, I didn't do my nails. I didn't moisturize my face. I became an absolute tomboy. I used to walk around in overalls. I've only just started wearing makeup probably about 5 years ago. I hated it. I didn't want to be a girl, because I didn't want to attract the opposite male to look at me. I wanted to not be attractive because I was so scared of being seen. So I shut that part down. I would be the person that would be sitting in the background. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. And then I'd put on a lot of weight, and then I'd take it off. And then the minute someone would look at me, and this is another thing that would go on, that I would emotionally eat, because I was trying to, and this is the first addiction I had around it. I would emotionally eat to push it down. And I would emotionally eat because if I had that layer of protection of fat around me, no one would want me, right? No one would want me. So I was good. It was great. I was fine. I cut my hair. I had short hair. There was nothing feminine about me. I even used to speak like the bros. Like I was a real bloke. And I hung out with the guys, even though, because I felt safer hanging out with them and being their friend than anything else. Because if I was one of the girls over here, I used to hear them blaring about the girls. And for me, it was my safety. I was one of the blokes. No one would want me. And then when I went down this hole, like I put on a lot of weight. And then when I started losing the weight, I realized that I was starting to get looked at. And it wasn't actually until the females made comments that I would be like, oh, no, that's not good. Because if a woman was noticing, then men were noticing, because I didn't really listen to guys. I was like, we were just mates, blockouts, and no one actually said anything to me. And then when I did actually get noticed by guys, I freaked out. I would absolutely freak out. So it started with food, and then it went to alcohol and drugs, because I felt that when I was using an addiction, it was numbing me. It was making it so I couldn't feel. It was making it so that I would be in control because I would take a line of cocaine, I'd feel invincible. So no one was going to hurt me, no one with the speed, anything, whatever kept me in that space of being in control and in power. When I would go out into a social environment, I was okay because nothing was going to hurt me. And my mum always told me to be strong. So I really disconnected from who I was in that area, and I became this whole different identity. I became this whole different person. And it was to cope. It was to numb the pain, and it was to cope. It was the only way I knew how. And so I formed a lot of bad habits. But, once I started realizing what I was doing, I still kept doing them because they were me. They were a part of me that was safe. So even though I wanted to not drink or take drugs or not eat, it was my way of coping. And I didn't know how to break free from it. I didn't know how to change that, because even though we're in an environment that we don't want to be in, it becomes our familiar. So it becomes our safety. So sometimes, even though we want to break free, we don't, because this is just what I know. And then you've got the ego coming in, keeping you here, and your subconscious feeding the beliefs around everything else and the stories. And you just end up, it's just a lot easier to stay in this cocoon, in this place where you are. It's your safety. It's your place of being, even if it's as screwed up as mine was. It didn't matter. It was my known. It was my where I was safe. And that's our primary fear, is not belonging and being safe. So I was safe. I actually never believed that I would be where I am today. I never believed I would be a person that's sitting in front, having people staring back at me, whether it's I'm talking on stage, or whether I'm talking on my podcast, or I'm talking here, or I'm on my live stream, or I'm standing up and I'm at a retreat teaching, or I'm at a workshop, or whatever I may be doing. I never thought I would be that person, because I was always the person that didn't want to be seen. I was always the person that was standing behind, helping everybody else to thrive and grow. And now I sit here and I just cannot believe how far I have come. And I share this because I know that if I have come this far and I was just a train wreck, I know that other people can too. And it's just with a state of believing that you can start to transform your life. And it's making that decision that you're ready to actually heal. And, what did my healing journey look like? It's crazy. It's hard. I hate using that word. I don't believe in that word. And I don't think that word, everything for me is not hard. It's a journey. It's a challenge. It's a transformation. Everything's a learning curve. But my goodness, it was hard. It was messy. It was sticky. It was uncomfortable. The amount of times that I was on the ground, the fetal position, just crying my eyes out, just wanting to just stop it, stop the feeling, stop the remembering, stop it all. But I knew that what was on the other side was better than where I was. And the life I was living, I ended up in hospital. I was nearly dead. I had an overdose. And I knew if I didn't change, then I wasn't going to be here. It was as simple as that. I went down a big transformational journey of doing all the normal things that everyone do, with the way of healing, with psychiatrists, hypnotherapy. I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, and I only stopped smoking because my ex told me I couldn't. That's the sort of person I am. You couldn't do that. All right, I'll show you. That's who I was, masculine energy to the max. I was just a proud woman, which is probably why I feel like I'm a warrior. I did a lot of things that with what I would call the way that we're led to believe is the way of doing things. And it did help. It really did. I started to find myself. I started to move into a new space of realizing that I was worthy, but I was still just holding. I could not give myself to anyone completely. I was still using sex as power. For me, the main objective was I actually became the best faker of orgasms in the fucking world. Because I didn't like sex. I didn't like it. And I knew if I came, it was over. And as long as he was pleased, as long as he was happy, he would come back for more. So I wouldn't be abandoned and it all would be good because I was the queen of orgasms for them. And I just became the best blowjob expert in the freaking world. As long as they were happy, that's all that mattered. I would just get in there. I would get it done. I was playing a part because I couldn't feel my heart. I couldn't actually physically feel the lower part of my body. I'd also forgot to mention I had a hysterectomy at the age of 23. So I really did hate her. She was just blah. You know what I mean? So once I realized, and it's really funny because I gave myself for the first time ever, because I used to go in the end, when the last sexual abuse happened, I would go from man to man to man. Now, there was different reasons for this. There was, and I'll share this in another episode, but it was really because, number one, I needed a man in my life because my father left me the day I was born, and my brother went overseas, and every man always left me. And that was another programming I had running, which was just as messed up as the rest of them. And I would actually create that scene. But I became a master at being this identity that I had created. And when I started my transformation, I gave myself 3 years to be by myself because, as I said, I'd gone from man to man to man to man, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't know the essence of me. I was so disconnected with myself. I was still living in my masculine energy. The poor men that I would live with, they would have to fight for the masculine energy in the house. I was always in my power. No one could do anything for me. I remember when I met my husband, which was just under 3 years of me doing my 3 years by myself. I said, no, mean for 3 years. And I lasted just under 3 years. I was so proud of myself. I think it was 2 years and 10 months when I met my husband. And I remember, because I'd been through, he tried to do things for me and be like, what are you doing? Don't do that for me. It was a very different way of being. And it's when I realized that I needed to open myself up more. I needed to give myself more. I needed to learn about this intimacy, love, what sex was actually for. And it was like, I was like a little baby learning for the first time. And I was also scared as hell, but I knew to get to that place, I had to heal the wounds that I was carrying. I had to go into the place I needed to go so I could open myself up, because I was holding so much inside. So I started reconnecting with my lower part of my body. I was allowing myself to feel again. And I started learning how to love, and how to be intimate and how to receive love, and what it was all actually about, instead of being in this container of just using it as a power. So it's been a definite unraveling for me in that area. The biggest things I did when I realized that the way I was healing, I had to go deeper. And I did this thing called explosive sexual healing. Oh, good God. It was one of the most uncomfortable things I have ever done. You're basically in a room, and what it is you're actually removing the sexual trauma from inside your body. So you're on a massage bed. There's a man and a woman in the room. I'm not going to go completely into it because there's parts of it that just blow your mind. But basically, you are going into the trauma of it, and you're kicking and screaming. And then at the end of it, you're releasing it with an orgasm. So it is just unbelievably, like, I did things like that to heal myself. And it was definitely something that removed the emotional attachment from my body. It actually removed what I was holding inside me, but it also healed wounds around my father, my stepfather, the men in my life that had actually hurt me. And I found that I could actually forgive myself. And that was the biggest thing I had to do, was I had to come to a place of forgiving myself, because I blamed me. And as long as I was blaming myself, I was never going to be able to give myself to anybody else. It's not about blaming it. It's not about forgiving anyone else. It's about coming to a place where you're really peace, and you can feel that calm, and just feel that wonderment and reconnection with yourself, and that you know that you are doing the best you can. You know that whatever did happen, even if you were in some slight way to blame, that you are just on this crazy journey, experiencing it as with the tools that you're given in the best way that you can. And sometimes you may mess up, and sometimes you may do something wrong, and sometimes you may get out of control. But when it comes down to it, this is your life, and this is your experience, and this is your path, and this is a part of you that you just need to open up and surrender to the healing process, so you can find and love and just live in this beautiful state of pleasure, play, and happiness all your life, because that's what it's about. That's what we're here to do. And whatever healing you have to do, whether it's as crazy as what I did, or whether it's just as simple of sharing it with somebody so they can help you transmute it into love. When you can transmute your pain, and because you're either in pain or you're in pleasure in life, you're never in between. So when anything happens to you, you either hold it as a pain or you hold it as a pleasure. So and I'm not saying that you can definitely transmute sexual trauma into pleasure, but when you can release it, you can make room for pleasure to come in. You can make room for something that is more beautiful to enter into your body, into your mind, into your soul. You're not holding that space with something that is just causing you to be in such a trigger state all the time, or it's causing you to create these beliefs and these patterns and this programming around something that's not actually meant to be for you. It's meant to be something, you're meant to actually be engulfed in love and pleasure and play. Healing is an interesting journey, and what one can do for one person, we may not be able to do for somebody else. Or what one thing that may work for one person may not work for somebody else. So it's for you to find the best way that you can heal. But I believe that if you really want to get in and you really want to move yourself to a space of just like me, just loving intimacy. And it's like I've discovered this whole new thing. And I'm a female now. Like, I wear makeup, I do my nails, I do my face. I've really integrated my masculine and my feminine. And it's a beautiful space to be in. Sure, I go into my masculine too much and I go into my feminine too much sometimes, but I know where I can find my center. And when we find our center, we can really find a part of us that we left behind with those fragments. And for me, trusting and believing that this was a big thing that I had to do, that I could really find who the essence of my soul was big, because this part of my life created so much internal confusion and just memories of craziness, that to find to get back to the purity of who I am, with being able to heal from my sexual abuse, and there's still things that come up. I'm still in my healing process, but to be able to sit here and talk to you and hold no emotional attachment is a gift. It's an absolute gift. This is when I sit here and I go, that all that hours to get to where I am now, all the healing I did to get to where I am now was absolutely worth it. It was 100% worth everything I did. And I know I did other healing things. I did a lot of shamanic. I went and saw a shaman who helped me a lot with what I was holding within. I did a soul retrieval, because at each part that whenever we have a trauma, we actually leave a part of our soul behind us. So, when you get to that space and you're like, I just don't feel like me. I just don't feel like I'm complete. I feel like there's a part of me that's missing. That is because when something happens in your life, you leave a part of your soul behind. It's a safety thing. You leave it there. So when I did the soul retrievals, and I now do the soul retrievals on myself, and I felt each time like I was becoming more and more me. I found I was becoming who I was born to be. And that's really beautiful. That's a beautiful part of growth. So, one thing I want you to know is that I'm absolutely no different from anybody else on this planet. We've all been through things within our lives that have created trauma, and some have been really big for us and some have just been little, but the little ones are sometimes the ones that can leave the biggest scars, and they can leave the biggest wounds. And it can just take a simple line that is said by someone you love that can create a trauma within yourself and create a whole level of how a certain thing in your life will play out, especially around worthiness. So I encourage you to take that step, to open yourself up to healing, to honor yourself, to do what you need to do, and to go on a journey of reconnection to find who you truly are. And if it's something around sexual abuse, then I really encourage you to take that step, because at the other side of it is pleasure and happiness that you will just know when you get to that stage that it's worth it. And for me, the biggest, and if it's funny, for me, it's not the amazing orgasms or the great sex I now have. It's more so that I can look my husband in the eye, and I never could. I could never make eye contact. And something as simple as that is the biggest transformation in my life, because I now look into his soul, Whereas before I would look left, I'd look up, I'd look down, look everywhere. I could never look at anybody when I was, back then it was sex, but now making love, I couldn't. So to have that eye contact, to have that intimacy, even that one little thing, that one change has just been transformational for me in so many parts of my life. So thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Art of Quantum Healing. I cannot wait to share next week's episode with you. And please remember, your past does not define your future. You do.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Make sure to check out all the show notes of today's episode on my website by clicking on the link in the description. Also, make sure to join my newsletter to receive a free guided meditation to help you feel grounded throughout your day. Finally, make sure to subscribe to my channel and help us grow the community by sharing it with your friends. I am your host, Lisa Nadler, and this is The Art of Quantum Healing.